They mocked her accent, laughed at her shoes, called her most pathetic in front of the entire school. What they didn't know, she was a queen in hiding. This is the story of Isla Monroe, the silent new girl at an elite American prep school, targeted for being different, humiliated, ignored, pushed to the edge. But while her classmates schemed in hallways and whispered insults behind designer bags, Isla quietly prepared for something none of them could have imagined. She didn't just survive, she ascended. But what was that strange gold crest in her notebook? Why did a federal agent show up at her school one quiet Monday morning, and how did the girl they tried to erase end up rewriting the rules of power itself? By the time you reach the final scene, one truth will become undeniable. They weren't bullying a nobody. They were provoking royalty. Stay until the end. The final twist changes everything. It was the kind of morning that didn't promise much. Overcast skies, the smell of wet pavement, and the soft clatter of bus doors folding shut. In the sleepy town of Norcross, Illinois, Kingsley Academy stirred to life like it did every weekday, yawning awake through gossip, sneakers, and too much perfume. Nobody noticed the girl who stepped off the last bus. She moved like someone trying not to exist. Her posture was straight, her uniform perfect, and her hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Isla Monroe, 16, new to town, new to everything. Her shoes were polished. Her white blouse was pressed. But something about her said, "Don't look too long." And yet they did. Eyes followed her from the curb to the front gates, not because she was flashy, but because she wasn't. In a place where loud meant likable, her silence made them uncomfortable. Kingsley was a place for families with last names on buildings and plaques. The kind of school where cheerleaders had chauffeurs and the lunchroom was a battlefield of whispered alliances. You didn't show up without being someone. But Isla had. She had no entourage, no Instagram presence, and no clue why her name had spread down the hallway before she even opened a locker. "She's the scholarship girl," someone whispered. "From Europe, right?" "No, like a real foreigner." She said pavement instead of sidewalk. "And did you hear her voice? She sounds like she walked out of a castle." The rumors ran faster than her footsteps. "She's too perfect. Something's off." And just like that, Isla Monroe was labeled. At Kingsley, different was dangerous. She made it through her first few classes without flinching. She answered every question when asked, voice soft but steady. She didn't interrupt, didn't stutter, didn't fake a laugh when someone joked about her shoes being from little orphan Annie's closet. She just kept her eyes forward. But by the third period, the wolves had picked up her scent. Taylor Marks, Sabrina Holt, and Lila Carter sat in the back of Honors Lit, all flawless nails, tangled earbuds, and expensive pens that were more accessory than utility. They didn't need to say much. Their laughter was a language, their stares weapons. Taylor flicked her curls and leaned over her desk loud enough for half the room to hear. "Guess money can't buy style." Sabrina smirked. "Or personality." Lila snorted. "Or a green card." The teacher didn't notice. Or maybe she did and decided it wasn't her battle. Isla didn't react. She didn't even blink. But she heard it. All of it. At lunch, she sat alone under the outdoor canopy. Not because she didn't want company, but because no one offered it. Her tray was untouched. Her eyes flicked once to the courtyard, then down, to her lap. In her hands was a small notebook, worn at the edges. Faded blue. Its cover was blank, except for a stitched gold crest at the corner. Intricate, royal, easy to miss. Unless you were looking for it. She opened to the middle page as if finding an anchor. No writing, just a carefully folded letter, tucked between the lines. She didn't read it. She just touched the seal with her fingertips. And then she closed the book. Taylor watched her from across the courtyard. She thinks she's better than us, she muttered to Sabrina. Lila laughed. Just wait. We'll see how long the crown stays on her head. But Isla didn't hear them. She was already walking to her next class, shoulders square, feet light, head lowered, but never bowed. She passed by a row of lockers, her reflection rippling across the metal doors. For a moment, just 1 second, her expression shifted. Not fear, not hurt. A smile, small, knowing. Like she understood something no one else did. She was here for a reason, and in time, they'd know it. While they plotted to bring her down, Isla carried, something they couldn't see. And what came next would make the walls of Kingsley tremble. A throne. Among thorns, by the end of her first week, Isla Monroe had become a walking target. Not the kind of target people pelt with fists, but the kind they jab with rumors, side eyes, and whispers sharpened into daggers. At Kingsley Academy, the silence wasn't golden. It was threatening. And Isla's silence, it screamed the wrong kind of confidence. She still answered questions in class, still aced her quizzes, and still walked the halls like she didn't hear what everyone was saying, but they made sure she heard. The first prank came during lunch. A spill, deliberate, slow, and humiliating. Someone tripped with a full tray of spaghetti, and it just happened to fly toward her blouse. The stain was the color of mockery, gasps followed by giggles. A teacher looked up, then looked away. Tway. Second came the next morning. Her locker door was slightly ajar, her name scribbled in red marker across the inside. Go back to where you came from. The letters dripped like they'd been written in haste, or hate. Still, Isla didn't flinch. She simply pulled a cloth from her bag and wiped it clean before the first bell. She never spoke of it, never told a teacher, never reported the incident. And that quiet refusal made them angrier. The staff noticed. Of course they noticed. But Kingsley was not the kind of place to make noise over things that could stain its reputation. Isla didn't complain, and that gave them an excuse to do nothing. But what no one saw, what no one thought to ask, was what happened after she left the school grounds. At 3:30 p.m. sharp, Isla was picked up not by a parent but by a driver, in a clean black sedan. The car never turned into the neighborhoods of Kingsley's elite. Instead, it wound along a quiet road at the edge of town, where trees grew thicker and houses fewer. There, hidden behind ivy-covered stone walls, sat a manor, not enormous, but old and proud. The kind of house that whispered history with every wooden floorboard. This was where Isla lived. Inside, the walls were lined with oil paintings, dustless bookshelves, crystal knobs on every door, a library taller than most classrooms, a grand piano with keys that gleamed like bone. Mrs. Delaney was waiting in the marble foyer each day, always in gray, always with perfect posture. Her British accent wrapped every word in velvet, but her eyes were sharp as glass. She never asked about Isla's school day, never offered to call Kingsley on her behalf. Her job was not to interfere, but each evening after tea and study hour, she unlocked the west drawing room and said only 2 words. Begin, Your Highness. Because Isla Monroe was not just the girl in the corner of the cafeteria, she was Princess Isla of Heartmoor, the last living descendant of a fractured crown, from a monarchy no longer active but never forgotten. Her country, once nestled quietly in the northern edges of Europe, had fallen to political strife and silence. Her parents are gone. Her title was stripped by law but not by legacy. She had come to the U.S. in secrecy, under royal advisement. After the fall, Kingsley was not a punishment. It was her preparation. Each night, Isla stood in front of an antique mirror, hair tied back, feet poised. She recited the family oaths, not from memory, but from belief. Words passed through generations like blood. I serve with grace. I rise with honor. I fall, never forgetting who I am. She practiced her curtsy deeper than etiquette demanded. Practiced her smile. Soft, sovereign, not submissive. She read letters by candlelight. History, politics, law. And tucked between her books, folded precisely, was the crest she never showed, gold on blue, the royal emblem of Hartmore. It was the same one stitched inside her old notebook, the one they mocked without understanding. To them, she was the scholarship girl. To herself, she was still the heir. And while her classmates laughed at her shoes, mocked her voice, and scrawled ignorance on locker doors, Isla prepared, not for revenge, but for return. It came on a Thursday, late afternoon. Rain tapping gently on the tall glass windows of the manor. Mrs. Delaney entered the study without a sound. She held a cream-colored envelope, no return address, no stamps, just the seal, Hartmore's crest, in crimson wax. She handed it over, saying, "Nothing." Isla took it with hands that didn't shake. She slit the wax carefully, peeled open the note, and read. Her breath caught, just slightly. Then she folded the letter closed, pressed it to her chest, and turned to the window. Outside, the rain blurred the trees, the sky, the future. But her gaze was steady, because the message was clear. Prepare. Your return may be sooner than expected. While the girls of Kingsley plotted their next insult, Isla unfolded her bloodline, and the first secret she'd hidden from them was just the beginning. In a town like Maple Glen, Illinois, where family legacies weighed more than GPA and last names came with invisible crowns, high school wasn't just a place to learn, it was a battlefield. And Taylor Marks had long ruled Kingsley Academy, like a queen without a crown. So when Isla Monroe walked those halls, silent, graceful, unimpressed, Taylor saw a threat, not a mystery. "She thinks she's better than us," Taylor whispered one morning, clutching her lavender iPhone like it was a scepter. "Let's remind her where she stands." And that's when the game began. They called it a tradition, though no teacher knew about it. A prank hidden inside a school dance, passed down through seniors like a ritual. A list was drafted in secret. Fake categories, fake nominations, all meant for laughs. Their laughs. Meanwhile, Isla kept doing what she always did, walking quietly, watching closely, never flinching. That Friday afternoon, just hours before the spring formal, Isla lingered near the science hallway, her schedule misprinted again. As she turned a corner, she heard a clatter, a snapped mop handle, water spreading across the floor. Mr. Ruiz, the janitor, sighed and crouched down. Most students would have passed, but Isla stopped. She stepped forward, knelt, beside him, picked up the broken pieces, and held the mop steady while he wrapped tape around the splintered pole. She didn't say much, just smiled softly, like kindness didn't cost her a thing. And down the hall, Vice Principal Langley saw everything. He didn't say anything that day, but he watched. That evening, the gymnasium was a string-lit fantasy. Paper, lanterns, plastic chandeliers, a rented speaker system that echoed more than it sang. Students arrived in gowns their parents picked and tuxes they'd never wear again. Isla wore a second-hand blue dress that hung just slightly loose at the waist. Her hair was pulled into a simple braid with no glitter, no flair, just grace. She didn't come to dance. She came because Mrs. Delaney told her even shadows deserve to step into the light sometimes. So she stood by the punch bowl, quietly sipping watered-down fruit juice, while Taylor and her court buzzed by the photo booth, laughing too loudly. And then the microphone crackled. Principal Harden was supposed to announce the formal award, most likely to run for office. Best laugh. The usual fare. But when Taylor passed him a new note card, one she insisted was last minute, He simply shrugged and read. And finally, he said, voice half amused, a surprise student-voted title. Most pathetic. A few students chuckled, not realizing what was about to unfold. Then he glanced at the card again and hesitated. Isla Monroe. The gymnasium paused. Every head turned. Isla stood motionless. For a moment, the room didn't breathe. Whispers bloomed like wildfire. A few gasps. A few muffled laughs. Taylor's hand went to her mouth. The performance of faux shock already in. Play. But Isla walked forward. She didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. She didn't cry. She walked like she had walked every day since her exile, with her chin high and eyes soft as if she'd already seen the worst the world could do and survived. The crowd parted slowly. The stage wasn't built for humiliation, but tonight, it became her throne. She climbed the steps, turned toward the microphone, and faced the room full of voices that had once laughed without mercy. And then she said, calmly, clearly, with the kind of poise no one could teach, "If this is your idea of royalty, then thank you. But I already have a crown you'll never see." Silence. Taylor blinked. Someone near the bleachers lowered their phones slowly, recording the moment with trembling fingers. And somewhere in the crowd, a cheer. Not loud, not planned, but real. It started with one clap, then two, then a wave of stunned applause that had nothing to do with the award and everything to do with what Isla had just taken back. Not dignity, but power. Because there are moments that break people, and then there are moments that reveal them. That night, Isla Monroe didn't walk off the stage. She descended it, like the heir she was, not to a prom crown, but to something much deeper, a truth she no longer needed to hide. And back by the punch table, Mr. Langley leaned against the bleachers, arms folded, eyes thoughtful. He hadn't clapped, but he didn't need to. He knew what he'd seen. The next morning, a student uploaded the clip to TikTok with no caption, just a crown emoji and Isla's name. It hit 1,000 views before sunrise. By noon, it was at 20,000 and climbing. In the days that followed, Taylor's version of the story began to unravel, because while laughter fades, the internet never forgets the sound of truth. By Monday morning, Kingsley Academy wasn't the same, not because the walls looked different or the lessons changed, but because the name Isla Monroe now echoed down hallways like a question too big to ignore. The viral video had crossed state lines overnight. Comments swarmed beneath it, admiration, confusion, theories. Who was this girl? Why did she speak like that? What kind of teenager answers cruelty with calm? Most thought it was just elegance, but one woman watching from Washington, D.C. recognized something else. Protocol. That morning, while the other students filed into homeroom, Isla was called to the main office. Not urgently, not harshly. Just a soft message from the receptionist. "Miss Monroe, please report to administration." She walked calmly, unaware her world was about to tilt. The office was too quiet. Principal Harden didn't speak at first. He just motioned toward the window where a black SUV idled beside the school flagpole. Inside it, a man in a navy blue suit waited. No badge visible, just posture, upright, attentive, patient. "Isla," Harden said gently, "we've had inquiries, not from the school board, from much higher." She nodded slowly, not surprised. "Not really. The Department of State received a communication early this morning," he added. "It came from your family's government." He didn't ask questions, maybe because he already knew some of the answers. Or maybe because the letter they'd sent made the rest irrelevant. She didn't deny anything. She simply asked, "May I still graduate here?" Harden blinked. The request wasn't about special treatment. It was about finishing something on her terms. Outside, the man in the SUV stepped out. He wasn't Secret Service, but close. Diplomatic Security Service, assigned discreetly to protect transitional figures whose political status might endanger them, even abroad. He wasn't there to take Isla away. He was there to make sure she remained safe until she chose otherwise. Within hours, the news broke. Not through gossip, through headlines. American high school student identified as royal heir of Ilawan. A name few had heard outside textbooks or diplomacy briefings. A nation no bigger than Vermont, nestled between Austria and Slovenia, long led by symbolic monarchs, but now facing a full constitutional reform. And the next in line? The girl who had just been voted most pathetic at her prom Kingsley's hallways went silent for all the wrong reasons. Taylor Marks, Sabrina Holt, and Lila Carter didn't walk taller. That day, they walked smaller. Suddenly, their cruelty had a spotlight. And worse, it had receipts, screenshots, comments, footage of laughter. The sound of Isla's quiet defiance replayed across platforms. By fourth period, Taylor's father had called twice. So had Lila's aunt, a donor for the alumni board. Rumors swirled that the embassy of Ilawan had flagged certain families for review. Not revenge. Just consequence. The consequence was terrifying when you were used to getting away with everything. But Isla, she didn't change. She sat in her usual spot in English class, taking notes on Pride and Prejudice with the same delicate cursive. She walked the same hallway, wore the same cardigan, tied her braid the same way. Some students tried to say they'd always had a feeling. Others claimed they'd been nice to her, even if they hadn't. Even teachers began to act differently, polite, overly apologetic, overly warm, as if kindness now meant clearance. But Isla didn't accept the invitations, the praise, or the apologies. She asked only one thing: let me stay. Let me finish. Because whatever crown waited across the Atlantic wasn't as important as what she was. Building here, not in marble courts, but in tiled hallways, beneath fluorescent lights beside lockers that still jammed. Mrs. Delaney, the housekeeper, never said much at home. But that night, as she prepared tea in the estate kitchen, she set down a porcelain cup and said softly, "They underestimated you." Isla smiled without turning. That's what makes it work. And outside, the black SUV waited quietly at the edge of the driveway. No sirens, no spectacle, just safety, just readiness. The next morning, she returned to school wearing the same uniform. But something in the way she walked said she had never been hiding. They just hadn't been looking closely enough. That afternoon, a letter appeared in Taylor's family mailbox, sealed with the mark of Elowen. It wasn't a threat, it was a request for a review of scholarship sponsorships tied to ethical compatibility. And suddenly, power looked a lot like accountability. By the time spring rolled in over Kingsley's mossy brick walkways and ivy-framed windows, Isla Monroe had become a quiet force. She hadn't asked for loyalty, hadn't demanded respect, but the school watched her differently now. Not like royalty, like someone who had endured fire and came out carrying water. She didn't use her title, never brought it up, never corrected classmates who still whispered her name with half-formed theories. But she wore her dignity like it had always been stitched into her sleeves. Instead of taking center stage, Isla pulled others into the light. She volunteered to tutor 2 freshmen who were failing algebra. She slipped anonymous envelopes into lockers, bus fare, lunch credits, a kind note signed only with a small gold crown drawn in pen. And then she did something unexpected. She started organizing a charity drive. It wasn't flashy, no banners, no hashtags, just a quiet sign-up sheet posted outside the library. Winter Gala, benefiting homeless youth in the Tri-County area. No sponsor logos, no selfies, just action. And slowly, students joined, some out of guilt, some out of curiosity. But most because they wanted to be near the calm that followed Isla now. The gala was set for early May, held in the historic town hall building, the same place that once hosted Taylor's Sweet 16, and Taylor noticed. She noticed the shift, the energy, the orbit that had changed. She noticed how Isla had taken what was meant to break her and built something instead. So one afternoon, Taylor approached, not with insults, not with sarcasm, with flowers. White roses, probably from her stepmother's. Greenhouse. "Let's start fresh," she said. "No hard feelings, right?" Isla didn't reply. She just accepted the roses, held them a moment, then placed them in the trash as she turned the corner. Because forgiveness isn't about optics, and mercy isn't theater. Mrs. Delaney said nothing when she saw the stems in the bin that evening, but as she poured tea by the window, she slipped something across the counter. An envelope, aged, cream-colored, edged in pale blue. On the back, a wax seal faded long and cracked with time. Isla knew the handwriting. Her mother's, Mrs. Delaney's eyes, glistened just slightly. She wrote it when she knew the treatments would fail. "Told me to wait for the right moment." Isla held the letter like glass. Upstairs in the quiet of her room, she read it slowly, line by line, word by word. Her mother had written of strength, of restraint, of the difference between vengeance and justice. One line was underlined twice. "Kindness is your scepter, mercy your crown." That night, Isla couldn't sleep. She thought of the gala, of the people coming, of the lives the fundraiser could touch, and of the girl who once shoved her into a locker and laughed when she cried, "Taylor Marks." What did she deserve? What did Isla want to give? The next morning, Isla sent a message through Mrs. Delaney, a formal letter. No emojis, no smiley faces, just an invitation to speak at the gala, to introduce the first performer and say a few words on behalf of the student body. Taylor didn't believe it was real. She triple-checked the envelope for a hidden threat, scanned it for sarcasm. But there was nothing, just a gesture and a choice. The gala arrived fast. Students dressed in their finest, faculty seated at long, white-clothed tables. A string quartet played softly on the stage, and then Taylor stood at the podium, hair curled, voice shaking. She looked out over the crowd and started reading from her card, but halfway through, her hands trembled too hard to hold it. She stopped, took a breath, then spoke without the script. "I used to think power was being feared," she said. "That silence from others meant I was winning. The room was still. But the truth is, I was loud because I was lonely. I was cruel because I was scared." She glanced sideways toward the third row where Isla sat, expression unreadable. "My family isn't what people think. My parents haven't had dinner together in 2 years. I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore. But I know I don't want to be her again." A pause. "I hurt people because I thought hurting was strength. But someone I hurt gave me a microphone instead of a mirror, and now I have no excuse not to tell the truth." She stepped down. There was no applause, just quiet, the kind that doesn't judge, only listens. Later, Isla took the stage. Her dress wasn't expensive, her shoes weren't designer, but she walked as if the room belonged to her because she wasn't performing. She was remembering. "I was taught that a crown isn't something you wear on your head," she said. "It's something you earn with your hands." Her voice didn't rise, but it filled the room like light. Mercy is not weakness. It is controlled. It is courage. It is the strength to see someone's worst and still choose not to mirror it. People leaned in. Some students wiped their eyes. Even a few teachers blinked hard behind their glasses. Because it wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning wrapped in grace, and it changed something. Not in one night. Not completely, but enough to make cruelty think twice before speaking again. The next morning, the mural team asked Isla if she'd pose for the final piece, not as a queen, but as a student standing among others. Head up, hands open, and she said yes. The video didn't explode because of the headline, not at first. It wasn't the word princess that made the world pause, it was what she said after. Clips from the gala began surfacing within hours, shaky iPhone footage stitched together by classmates, who for once weren't trying to mock her. Isla stood behind the mic, eyes calm, voice steady. In the background, chandeliers shimmered above folding chairs. But what people remembered was the silence, and her final words. What power looks like is how you choose to treat those with none. It hit something raw. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't rehearsed. It was honest. Almost too honest. Within a week, the clip reached a local news affiliate, then a regional morning show. Then it landed, without Isla's consent, on a national student leadership channel. And suddenly, Kingsley's scholarship girl wasn't just whispered about in lockers. She was reposted, quoted, admired, but not for her lineage, not for her exile, not for the crown she never once claimed. They watched her because she reminded them what dignity looked. Like when the world tried to crush it, Isla didn't change. She still arrived at school before the first bell, still studied in the library, still helped tutor Marcy and Aiden through final exams, offering flashcards and steady encouragement. She walked the halls like the rumors never mattered, because they didn't. Not anymore. And while some tried to get close to her now, asking for selfies, trying to copy her calm, most simply watched her from a respectful distance, unsure of how to engage with someone who held herself like a storm waiting to be useful. Then came the announcement. Graduation neared, and with it came the honors list, Mr. Langley called Isla into his office, a room always smelling faintly of printer toner and lemon disinfectant. He closed the door gently, leaned against the desk, and handed her a letter. "You've been selected," he said quietly, "to deliver the farewell address." Isla blinked, not out of surprise, but because she knew what this moment meant. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she asked a question. "Who chooses the janitor of the year?" Langley raised an eyebrow. "Well, no one. It's not an official title." "It should be," Isla said. The next morning, the intercom buzzed. Mr. Langley's voice came through, scratchy but clear. "There's been a change in our graduation program. This year's student speaker has declined the honor and requested it be given to someone else." Pause. "Mr. Elias Moore, custodian, friend, gentleman." A beat of stunned silence. Then cheers, loud, genuine, unfiltered from the hallways. Isla didn't watch it from a distance. She was there in the front row as Mr. Moore, stunned, tearful, slightly confused, stood at the podium and gave a few words about showing up every day, about being seen by someone who never looked down on him, and about how kindness, when consistent, is louder than applause. Graduation arrived with warm skies and chairs lined across the football field, white gowns, flapping in the breeze, a brass band stumbling through pomp and circumstance. Isla walked across the stage like she'd always meant to, head high, eyes steady. She wore the school colors with simple grace. No tiara, no crest, just her. As she accepted her diploma, the audience clapped, not thunderously, but enough to mean they understood. She didn't wave. She didn't pose. She just nodded once, small, soft, and complete. Taylor Marks clapped from the back row, no phone in her hand, no smirk on her face, just stillness, and maybe relief. By the time the hats flew into the air, the chapter had ended, but not for everyone. That afternoon, inside the quiet hallway of Kingsley Academy, Isla walked alone. The classrooms were locked, posters torn down, lockers swung open with forgotten pencils inside. She stopped by her old locker, ran a hand across the cold metal. Then she slipped something off her wrist. The bracelet, gold thread, crimson ribbon. The Monroe family crest was hand-stitched into the underside. It had been her reminder of who she was, where she came from, and what she owed to the ones who came before her. Now she didn't need it anymore, because she wasn't hiding. She was ready. Footsteps echoed behind her. Girl freshman. Quiet, new, shoulders hunched, eyes cast low. She looked like Isla once had. Before the dance, before the video, before the world remembered how to listen, their eyes met, and without a word, Isla stepped forward, unclasped the bracelet, and handed it over. No explanation, no claim, just one girl telling another silently, "You matter." The girl looked at it, then at Isla. Her hands trembled just slightly, and she nodded. When Isla walked out the front doors of Kingsley for the final time, the sky was wide open, blue, bold, unapologetic, Mrs. Delaney waited in the car, but Isla paused first. She turned back, took in the empty steps. The flagpole, the echoes of who she'd been. She didn't need the crown to rule. She'd already built a kingdom, one quiet act at a time. She didn't need to wear the crown to rule the room. She'd already conquered their hearts. Now that you've seen Isla's story unfold, ask yourself this. Would you have stayed quiet, played it safe, and kept your head down, or would you have stood up? Not to be seen, but to make sure others weren't forgotten. Isla didn't need a throne to make an impact. She didn't need to shout or fight or prove herself to anyone. She led with grace. She moved with quiet strength. And in the end, she changed more than just opinions. She changed hearts. Because some queens don't need crowns. They rule through the dignity of their actions, through kindness offered when no one's looking, through the courage to speak when it matters most. If this story moved you, even a little, hit the like button and subscribe. We bring you stories that speak for those who are often silenced, and tell us below. Who was your favorite character? And why? We'll pin the best comment. And who knows? Your answer might inspire our next story, because sometimes the girl they mocked, the one they thought didn't matter, she's the one rewriting the ending.